Hello, Hannah. Hello, Polly. Right. We found the chat. Great. Thanks for starting us off, Polly. I don't know if it's good morning for you or if it's already good afternoon or middle of the day. Curious where everyone is tuning in from. So maybe head over to the chat and let us know. Are we Europe-based, APAC? Guten Morgen, Berlin, Glasgow, Amsterdam, France. Oh my God, Luciana, good morning. I am in Uruguay, welcome. India, that's already midday, afternoon. Okay, so we do have people joining from the four corners of the world. That's always fun to see with the Shakers events. I'll kill the music as we're settling in. Welcome. My name is Anna Marie. I'm tuning in from Amsterdam today, as well as Bernardo. We're co-located, and if we haven't met so far, I am, I guess you could say, the first L&D Shaker. Community started here locally 5 years ago, and it's now spreading and growing. Always a pleasure to spend time with L&D peers and learn from one another. And this is our, I don't know, 6th, 7th AI Learn Teeny. We've been having these AI in learning and L&D sessions for the month of October. We've been learning from many community members, and we have 3 more to go, including the one today hosted by Bernardo. So this week we're closing it off. Some of them were recorded. Head over to our YouTube channel to find recordings of the ones you've probably missed. Not all of them were recorded. Today we are recording, so this is gonna land on YouTube and then so I'll share it with the community. We're spending an hour with Bernardo today to talk about upskilling when it comes to AI and generative AI, specifically ChatGPT and other tools. Maybe you can share us in the chat if you were asked already or if you have already deployed any type of upskilling, training, awareness programs when it comes to AI within your organization. And probably Bernard is going to ask you about that as well. He is a fellow Shaker already for a while. Uses behavioral science, data analytics, and digital solutions to predict human behavior. He's a data and AI transformation specialist at Workera and helps organizations set up skills transformations that are accountable and useful to supporting business objective. And he's bringing a case study today of a AI upskilling program. And I see that there are some people already working on this topic. So Bernardo, we're all ears to be learning from you. The floor is yours. Take it away. And by the way, screen sharing happens. You have to click on that tab at the top if you don't see the slides. Thank you, Bernardo, for taking the stage.
Thanks, Ana Maria. Yeah, good to be sharing here some of the learnings that we collected since last year. The topic of the call, when we were brainstorming, became from gap to great. And we use these keywords to represent the typical initial situation that a group of people faced last year in the workplace when specifically the generative AI tools and technologies were launched and became available for everyone in the world via subscription. So it was accessible and conversational, which created a use case. The use case is that we had a kind of overnight skills gap. And at my work, we helped organizations to close this gap as fast as possible. I will not talk about the company and what we do, but I've used data from many organizations, more than 10, to combine and create this case study that became an article and motivated the learnings that we are going to take a look today. So that's why we title it also leveraging skills data for AI transformation. So it's a conversation that will be mostly useful for people who aim to implement programs that will benefit from some skills data collection. Is that clear? Good. Okay.
Clear.
Ana Maria will help us to check the chat. So if at any point you have a curiosity or a question, let's stop and discuss that. We'll also aim to have a session at the end where we can discuss extra things. I will not be able to go over all the details. There are topics that we are going to talk today that they can be just them a specific talk. So what we can say about the use case from last year in terms of generative AI. We definitely had a situation in which many companies, they had to develop the workforce in what we considered at the beginning an unfamiliar domain. But what we will see later on from the data is actually that when we verified, when we tested the skills with multiple choice, open-ended questions, there was a considerable proportion of people in the companies we analyzed that they were already familiar, especially with the potential use cases of generative AI, ChatGPT, which was surprising at the beginning. But Workera works mostly with Fortune 500 companies. We suspect that people are bombarded by PDFs, workshops, lots of articles in the media that they end up teaching them some of the concepts, especially the use case. But we did find that people had lower skills, like weaker skills in how to implement generative AI, for example, in a responsible way, with fairness, with accountability, with reliability, and that was also a surprise. So if you are curious after this session to go into more detail about Workera and this specific use case, I will share at the end also the article that discusses this use case in more detail. As a timeline, just for us to refresh what happened at the end of 2022 and the middle of 2023, we got access to ChatGPT. Generative AI started to be discussed as a channel to improve productivity. And in my job, we started to have companies asking very quickly before the summer of 2023 to have ways to measure the skills of their workforce because we were already doing this for more than 50 different domains, topics. But now we needed to deploy quickly ways to verify skills in generative AI, ChatGPT, and prompt engineering. And these are the three domains that I'm using the data today to create a use case to share with you. The company has more than 70 domains, but we will concentrate the findings on these three. Okay, and why do I bring this timeline? Because it was during the summer of 2023 that the company quickly created the assessments and we started to collect the data, right? But today, what I did for today is I collected the most recent data. So what you will see from now on is results of people upskilling what was their starting point and the end point, how many days they took to improve their skills and perhaps to achieve literacy in generative AI, ChatGPT, and prompt engineering during 2014. Okay, if you want to see what happened in the first 6 months of the programs, you can also find this in the article that I talked about before. The article is in the blog, so later on you can go there and find this overnight skills gap article, and then you have the historical use case from 2023 until the beginning of 2024. But what I will share today with you is what's happening this year. Okay. So this use case is used to motivate a second discussion, which is what actually Ana Maria asked me to talk about, which is how you implement these programs and you make them accountable. And I put this together in what I call the skills transformation canvas. Okay, but to understand the canvas, we need to understand the skills metrics. So we will use the use case from generative AI domains launched in 2023. I will show you how you measure progress, success, improvement at scale. And then you use this information to make the program accountable and try to boost engagement. Okay, this is where I use a bit of my training in behavioral science together with data science to combine these two things together. And hopefully we will have some time to tell you what use cases we unlock once the program progresses, because there are many use cases that you cannot launch right at the beginning. For obvious reasons, you don't have information, but as the program progresses, then you can start to create coaching and mentoring informed by data. You can do skills transferring programs, community of practice and role modeling, so on and so forth. Okay, so this will be the building blocks of our conversation. Any curiosities or questions from anyone so far? Just claps from Ana Maria. Okay, let's go then. If you ask me, what would be the main goal today is very much to show you how to make the program accountable. Okay. I'm just using the AI literacy program as the use case, and because it's a trending topic, we hear about them more and more, because it's not only for the center of excellence of a company, but for everyone. And it helps you to demonstrate the results quite quickly, implementing it at scale after you pilot it. And a novel topic for many of us, which might be the use of skills data. As an example, I just want to take one of the domains that we have data today, which is generative AI. I'll give you examples of ChatGPT and prompt engineering later, but just to show how the data is structured, and this is very much how Workera thinks of what a domain is. So machine learning is not a skill in the taxonomy that Workera uses. Machine learning is a domain with dozens of skills. And as in any other taxonomy, there is some kind of hierarchy that we classify as subdomains. And then in each subdomain, you have many topics, many skills that are linked to tasks, things that people do in their daily job. So here, for example, you see that the generative AI has 3 subdomains, and one of them is about applications. And what you see, the breakdown later on in green, are all the Bloom taxonomy-like skills related to those applications. As I said before, one of the curiosities that we got when we first started to measure people's skills was about their knowledge in ethical and social considerations versus applications. Well, even in 2023, people were very good already in about knowing applications of generative AI, because this is what appears a lot in the media. But ethical and social considerations, we could see that people had more difficulties to recognize how to, preserve privacy, debiasing, what reliability was actually a thing in generative AI. Okay, so just have in mind that this is the kind of data structure that we have. And the sample, as I said, is more like a current sample, actually a subsample, but it's from 2024. So we have data here from more than 3,000 employees, from more than 10 organizations. We've implemented programs. I try to be explicit on that. So there is wide communication, reinforcement mechanisms, leading to more than 5,000 assessments. So each individual assesses in more than one domain of those three generative AI domain related, and in this year. Okay, so this is the when, the what, how long, and so on. Okay. First slide that has a lot of information. Okay, so I wanted to share with you, first of all, how the distribution of skills occur right at the beginning. So when people take the first assessment, we classify them in three proficiency levels: beginning, developing, and accomplished. Later on, I will break down what actually the beginning level means, the developing level means, accomplished level. But I know that in this group, many of you are familiar with taxonomies for skills verification. So you can think of the beginning level as a person who can understand, recall, interpret some basic concepts and applications. And an accomplished level here means that the person, this employee, is able, most likely, to build, to engineer, to design things related to that domain. Obviously, here we have three domains that are at literacy level. So when you see accomplished here, means that the person in this case is literate in generative AI, literate in ChatGPT, and literate in prompt engineering. These three domains in the Workeras catalog are not super technical domains. There are technical domains covering these topics, but these ones are for everyone in the organization to start becoming familiar with, in this case, generative AI. Second thing that is a bit more complex here is that we also monitor the maturity of a team in these domains. And this is a consequence of what you want to do with the information. So you cannot do much with a team that only 10% or 20% of people have really strong skills in, let's say, ChatGPT. For example, if you wanted to give people tasks related to ChatGPT, you would end up giving the same tasks to the same people, because you still have 80% of the team with weaker skills in those domains. So we say that for you to start having safety, confidence, and flexibility in your task allocation, you need to have at least 50% of the team. I think we changed the sharing.
Are you sharing screen by mistake?
Do I need to go there and do it again? I think so, right?
Yes, you have to do it again. That is weird.
What about now? Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I was talking about the broad-based capability, right? Um, you can think of, a team is not flexible to perform tasks and projects if more than half of the team does not have the skills necessary for those tasks and projects. And we call this level a broad-based capability. This is when 50% of the people have strong skills. The goal for a successful transformation is usually 75%. This is when you start to have the compounding effects that, LinkedIn published a study showing that when you apply a skills-based organization, you have 10 times more chance of staffing a project. And it's mostly because you know where the skills are and you can boost the skills. So if 3 out of 4 people in your team have those skills, your success ratio is extremely higher. Now, from the chart, we can see that actually people in their first time measuring their skills in generative AI and ChatGPT, we had a majority of people that were already literate, not technically strong in generative AI, but they could recall, interpret, identify use cases, and many of them could even understand what would be the ethical implications of it. There is a selection bias here. Most of these companies that are in the sample, they are consultancy firms too that Workera has as clients and large firms. So probably what you would see in another sample would be much higher.
Sorry, Bernardo. I think I have to go share again. Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, you just keep seeing the forest that I have as a background. Okay, let me stop here and see what we have as curiosities or questions from the audience, just before I move forward with more skills data. Who wants to share any curiosity or question here?
Liz, Polly?
Yeah, so with the responsible AI piece, I think that is really, really critical in organizations because that is where the most damage or impact can happen if people don't know about the risks. And a lot of the stories that we hear on the news about generative AI and people sharing information that they shouldn't have shared, it comes from people not being trained or not being aware that that's an issue because you don't know what you don't know. So how have you managed that and made it without making it a mandatory training for everybody? How have you managed to implement that?
Yeah, later on today I'll share 2 other articles with similar studies we did that might help you. And one is about responsible AI domains.
Yep.
And but specifically in the professional services firms last year. And I'm saying that because most of the investment, most of the money that is flowing to generative AI is actually going to consultancy firms at the moment. And we could see this in their activity, upskilling their consultants in 2023. And they gave a lot of attention to responsible AI. So in this article where we shared results of those programs, you can see where people have more difficulties understanding responsible implementations. In order to make this accountable, but not forcing people to train, what in Workera we actually do is that you offer people the access to the assessment, so they can measure their skills, but the manager or the person leading that team does not need to have access to individual level data, only the group level. So people use the assessment as a mentor to get a list of skills that they actually need to learn. And when they learn, they save a lot of time because now they know precisely what skills they are strong and which ones they need to improve on.
Mhm.
So this is one. The second thing is that people make a lot of mistakes about their self-assessment. So there's another article there that I will share that measured how people rate their skills, and also in generative AI, ChatGPT, and what actually the verification tells. So there's a lot of people who overestimate their skills.
Always.
But there's even more people, especially in literacy domains, that they underestimate their skills. So
Okay.
they don't know they know something. And this
Mm.
comes a lot from previous readings, discussions that they had with friends, things that they passively consume from the media. And when they learn in a full course offered by their employer, they end up having to go through videos and trainings that they already have the skills.
Yeah.
So I will point to the
Thank you.
articles that are useful for you. Okay, thanks, Liz.
Lovely. Thanks.
Good. Yes, good to see that what comes next is useful too. So domain maturity, according to our approach, is very much looking at how many people are job ready for a domain. And we also don't want to have too many beginners. In a successful transformation, you want to have some, because there are people who are transitioning from other roles, other groups, but you want to keep that below 10%. Let's take the example of ChatGPT and use, again, something that I need to explain some terminology. Workera has this scale that goes from 0 to 300, measuring the skills of an individual. But this is just because the algorithm needs a continuous scale. And this scale is divided in 3 levels: the beginning, the developing, and the accomplished. In the beginning level, people are mainly able to recognize and understand the simple concepts and applications, while in the developing level, people start to demonstrate the ability to evaluate and interpret problems in that domain, and even to discuss potential solutions. When people start to demonstrate skills that are related to the design, engineering, developing solutions, then the algorithm, the adaptive tests will identify that they are actually in the accomplished level. We also have a typical journey to show you here. So the average individual starts at around 120 points, which is in the lower level of the developing proficiency in their first assessment. After that, they will get a personalized learning plan based on the skills that they need to improve. And they will go on average through 2.5 reattempts, 2.5 moments that they measure their skills again. And after 85 days on average, they end up with a score of 211, which is now accomplished, in the lower level of accomplished, representing a 75% improvement on the ChatGPT literacy level skills. So if you would ask me what is the typical learning journey or literacy journey for this specific domain, ChatGPT, it would be going from 120 to 211, which is developing to accomplished in this amount of days, usually studying around 2 hours per week. But many people who go faster, they learn more than 2 hours per week, obviously. Any curiosities or questions?
There is a curiosity from Lisa. Could you interpret what does the data represent on this graph? So this is the average of the initial assessment, and then a subsequent question, how is this scored measured? And maybe from me here, are we going to see some of the items that you're using, like some examples of the questions you're asking or how you're measuring it?
Yeah. Okay, the first terminology. In the horizontal axis, we have represented the levels. And these levels, they mimic the score, the scale of the score that goes from 0 to 300. And the cut levels, the cut scores are 100 and 200 to move from beginning to developing to accomplished. What I showed here as the 120, this is the average individual, like taking everyone into consideration who assessed in ChatGPT literacy. In their first assessment, the average individual scored 120, which is the lower level of the developing proficiency. Is that clear?
So, Bernardo, is there any significance to the fact that it's 100, 200, 300? It could have been 1,000, 2,000. Like, it doesn't matter that it's 100,
no.
2, 3. It's just a way to kind of measure in relationship with, right?
Yes. When the company started, I remember I was a user. I was not an employee. But the scale was 1 to 100. So, but then you would also have to have cut scores at 33 and 67, to represent the other proficiency levels. But in essence, that's why I wrote here this, simple guidance. The items that are in each interval, they reflect these verbs, evaluate and interpret. So you take the tasks that are typically associated, to these verbs from the taxonomy, and then you create items. Nowadays, the items are created with also large language models, also with generative AI. But until last year, is a bunch of people, assessment developers creating questions. I don't want to discuss too much about the psychometrics of it. I know that people get curious, but at the end, I also will point you to the articles that you can read about the methodology at Workera. It's just that this is not the topic that I was, let's say, asked to talk too much about today.
It's my fault. I know. No, that's okay. Just one thing, Samuela, if you want to point what's the non-linear profile of what I interpret as the learning curve depends on what factors. I don't know what you mean by this non-linear.
I mean, if I can jump in, I mean the line interconnecting the dots. You can see that, like, for example, it's very steep at the beginning, right? And then it kind of slows down and then it increases again. So is it more like a graphic representation, or it actually is like a profile, for example, from, I don't know, the difficulty of, skills and competencies that actually are acquired over the training program?
Oh, that's a good one. And for this one, when we, it's true. The learning velocity changes in different stages of the improvement. So that's why you have concavity, convexity, and so on. But most of the gains, they do occur actually for the typical user here in the middle. And it's interesting because, in I will have to talk about it, but sorry, Ana Maria. For a person who doesn't know anything about a subject, taking an adaptive test like Workera, a skills verification, doesn't add too much because probably the list of skills that the assessment will identify that you need to improve are almost all the skills, right? Because you are an absolute beginner. It starts to save time and money from the company, when people have a problem to find out what skills they actually need to learn. And this is very frequently the case for a low intermediate or intermediate level user, because let's say 50% of the skills, but you have no clue about what to learn next. And then you take the assessment and the algorithm will tell you exactly. So your learning curve will be steeper in the middle. Interesting, right, Samuel? We have an article that you can take a look. We call this the signature curves, and they will differ by domain too. It's like more technical domains like machine learning ops. This curve is different. It's very much more difficult, and learning velocity might be smaller. Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you. Perfect.
Nice. What I want to share next is, we know where people start, where they end, but what is the typical improvement in skills as measured by the score in each of these three domains? So I told you that typically in this 80 days period, people between the first and the last assessment, people have an improvement. And I showed you there in terms of percentage of accomplished, percentage of beginners. But here's like what you saw just for ChatGPT, but for the three domains. And as you can see in prompt engineering, typically the average user doesn't get to the accomplished level, like the 200 score. It's right there. Many people achieve. Some people still stay way below. It's a more complex subject, but you still get a 35% improvement between the first and the last assessment in prompt engineering. And ChatGPT is the domain that you have the highest improvement, highest success rate, perhaps because it's everywhere and people don't find it difficult to acquire the new skills. So this is what I call the blueprint of the title of the talk, like from gap to great, because this data reflects many programs that were implemented by more than 10 companies this year. And this is what is happening. This is the learning velocity that you should expect on average, depending on how good you communicate the goals of the program in these generative AI subjects. The other thing that we are trying to organize more in the skills data we have is learning velocity, because it differs by domain. But we created a method that we can measure how fast the organization or the team is acquiring new skills using the scale. So on average, in these three topics, generative AI, ChatGPT, and prompt engineering, we see that individuals, they can acquire 8 points per week by domain, studying up to 3 domains at the same time. So it's a lot of numbers, but basically this means that people can go in these 3 domains from a beginner level to an accomplished level, usually within 3 months, which is kind of the estimate that I gave you before, around 80 days of learning between the first assessment and the last assessment. If you want, for example, to be more successful in your programs, and this is what we try at Workera to improve in our clients, is to demonstrate that their learning velocity converges to something that is higher than 10 points per week per domain. And this means that they can go from beginning to accomplished in less than 2 months in a domain. Okay, so it's super important perhaps the most important metric is to monitor learning velocity, because it reflects engagement, communication, if understanding and conviction is actually being boosted by the program. Here is the set of articles that I want to share, because this is the last part that I will talk about skills data now. I just wanted to use it to demonstrate how people start, how people finish, but later on we will look at how to organize these things in a program. By the way, this is the article here that talks about the skills that people underestimate and overestimate their skills. It's published in the Fortune magazine, but it's also in the blog. And this is the one about responsible AI. That was another question that we had today. But specifically using skills data from professional services companies, large consultancy firms that are clients of Workera. So there you can take a look. If you are curious about the assessment, the psychometrics of everything, you can take a look at this series of articles, especially part 4 and part 5, where we talk about the skills transformation. And for Samuele, this article here specifically talks about the signature curves, like the ups and downs. Okay? Good. So forget about the Bernardo data scientist, and let's move to the Bernardo behavioral science by academic training now. First time I started to have contact with these topics 2 years ago, I was always thinking, okay, but what kind of use cases we unlock by knowing those things? And what first thing that came to my mind was the idea that we have personas or archetypes, typical behaviors, and in learning programs, one of the frameworks is the behaviors archetype matrix. So for me, it was quite insightful to realize that it's easy with skills data to find your skeptics. These people here that they don't use the platform, they for some reason, sometimes they are just getting married or having kids, but many of them are having a passive aggressive behavior towards the program. They do the opposite of what the company is asking. But you do find the champions, those that are learning fast, complying with the program, improving their skills, and you have a lot of information that would even allow you to identify them as role models. The second thing that this framework brought is that the champions are nothing more than those people, in this case, that have the skills that are necessary for the project. So I will consider a champion or give any other behavioral name that you want to those people that are having the skills that are required for specific initiatives. And with skills data, this is possible. For example, here I'm plotting the scores in the first assessment in 2 domains, generative AI and ChatGPT score. So each data point is a person, and the score of that person in ChatGPT and generative AI. So you can see that a lot of people are already here in the champion zone. They are literate in ChatGPT and generative AI from the beginning. So if there are tasks and projects that need literacy in these 2 subjects, you already have there 41% of the employees ready already in the first assessment in our sample. Perhaps and probably you can have very distinct situations across different organizations. But after people upskilled, the overall sample goes to 69%. So almost 70%, almost a successful transformation across all cases. And you can replicate this with any pair or even lists of domains, and find your champions to start one of the most powerful use cases, which is, for example, a role modeling program in a skills transformation. Good. So everything that I showed you so far is interesting in the sense that only 4% of the companies that were interviewed by LinkedIn Learning this year, they are actually doing those things. But it's growing, right? And 2024 is the year we'll probably see this chart next year, like many more companies doing the measurement of the skills, how it improved, how many projects they can now serve with these extra people that were upskilled. So everything so far is actually about something that until this year was not happening much. Lots of companies were planning and starting the programs, but not actually measuring the success or the improvement in skills. But now I've showed you some humble examples of how this can be done. Now, a lot of information, but this is the canvas that I will break down next. So abstract from all the information you have there, the skills transformation canvas is a canvas that contains the answers for the why of the program, how you are going to highlight this, especially to boost understanding and conviction, the actions that were verified by behavioral studies that are actually helpful to increase the chances of success. From Workera's data, we can see the pace of this implementation. And this is a suggestion. This is how I usually see it in 3 phases or more. That give people to do those cycles of between the first and the last assessment to reach the accomplished level, and the how. So this how is based on 3 types of actions. Some of them are related to explaining the why of the business case and structuring it, linking it with business goals. The second is about where you are going to use the skills data to make the program accountable and use metrics to demonstrate how you are making progress. And finally, how you can use this skills data for other use cases. And you will see that in the beginning of the program, you only have a limited number of potential uses, but obviously, as you acquire more data, you'll understand this better and better, and you will be able to unlock more use cases. So let me explain actually what is represented here on the left, the actions or what things you can do with skills data. They were inspired by the influence model. and I use the influence model not only because it has been suggested as a good inspiration for new initiatives, how to start designing and testing them. It's a good starting point. But these 4 factors here that can be used, like role modeling, skills development, reinforcement mechanisms, and understanding and conviction, they were also part of a study ran by McKinsey, interviewing many companies and looking at the success rates. Like, it's self-reported data, but gives us an idea of what happens to the success rate if a company does understanding and conviction in a program versus does not. And we can see that this is actually the factor that is most boosted by that has the highest impact in the success rate, but also the other factors that are in the influence model, they appear here as big boosters of success. So I took them and I use them in the matrix of the canvas. So what you have here on the left, it's very much the influence model. And what you are going to implement, execute, is use cases using skills data to boost each of these potential actions. Okay, so your experimentation is very much where you start, right? So I designed here with some arrows to show what you do first, second, next, but actually you don't need to start from defining the reinforcement mechanisms. For example, what metrics you are going to use to measure your success in the skilling goals. You could start, for example, from doing a pilot and actually start from the skills building and having some data. Then you see how good your people are in those topics, and then you create the enforcement mechanisms. But very much you have to, in the beginning, and this is what every framework says, you need to create the business case for skills and report the success of this first cycle. Then you start the next phase again with a report. This is very frequently a dashboard or a presentation, a communication-wide mechanism that will show what happened in the first 3 months. And then you already have use cases. You can identify heroes and champions. You can, from those people with strong skills, you can invite them to be your learning content curators. They can create training or simply newsletters, cheat sheets, everything using your processes and tools names. And you can also start to identify some potential coaches and mentors, leaders for the community of practice. But here's where the maturity level that I showed you at the beginning is important. You cannot establish a network of coaches and mentors if you don't know how many coaches and mentors you have in those subjects. So if you have less than 50% of a team strong in the skills that are needed in a project, then you will probably have only a few coaches and mentors, and you will burn them out because they will be assigned to many mentees at the same time. Continuing, it can be the case that even already here after month 4, you already can establish this coaching and mentoring activities, and then people can start transferring their skills to others, or even you will have ability to staff, use the skills data to staff people to tasks and projects, given the signals that you collected before. And then you do another cycle of wide communication. And actually what happens after phase 2 is a replication of phase 2, but with more and more information. So it just gets better and better because you reduce the error rate, and you become more and more precise in your upskilling plans and how you communicate the program. So this month 0 to 8 are critical. Perhaps the most difficult is the beginning because you don't have you have results, but you don't have a lot. You start to add a lot of value from month 4 to 8. And remember, all these phases are using the estimates that we got before in terms of learning velocity and how fast people improve their skills from the first assessment to the latest assessment. Okay, I will stop here to see if there is any curiosity for in the last 5 minutes here of the conversation. Let me hear one of the curiosities you have.
We don't have anything in chat, so if anyone wants to raise their hand and unmute and ask a question, feel free to do so. Yes, we have a office room, Yolan, third office room. There we go. Over to you.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sandra.
Thanks, Sandra.
So Could you walk us through this, like based on an example? So maybe it's like a bit easier to understand the steps.
Yeah, today I cannot do that because we will not have enough time. It's one of the motivations, yeah, to do this talk. Perhaps we can organize a second event that I will only work on a specific example from end to end, because in order to go more in depth, I would also have to show you the implementation of the program, which was not the right, let's say, goal for today. But yeah, I would love to do that and cite some extra sources on it.
Yeah, I would definitely be up for that. And also, if you have any other resources which could exemplify a bit more like how going through the steps, but as I understand that it's also quite new thing. So, so yeah, thanks for sharing.
In the blog that I shared before, there are at least 5 articles that are about measurement implementation. There is also a use case from Siemens Energy, how they did in their specific case that can be useful for the next step.
All right, thank you, Bernardo. Hannah, over to you.
I think you might have answered my question and what you've just said, actually, because I'm kind of new to this whole topic area and I'm going to be running a project on it. Where would you recommend I start? This has been good. You've given me a kind of good flavour of things, but you mentioned at some point in the talk that it was just the last couple of years that you've got up to speed with all of this. So I'd be keen to know your tips for where to start.
Yeah, so for that we can refer to this set of actions. One typical first action is to, for example, if you already have in your team, in your company, a skills framework. Very frequently, companies only have written job descriptions. So one good practice is to take those job descriptions and create a list of skills, not in text, but in a matrix. And then you will identify by role or by team what of those skills are necessary for the projects that the team needs to perform. This is called a skills matrix. You need that because it will determine what you need to have in your learning content, but also what skills you actually have to measure the improvement on. So skills matrix, transform your job descriptions that are written in text into objective goals in a skills matrix. Once you do that, you can define the goals. Like, what do I need to have? Do I need to have, do I aim to have 80% of my team or workforce literate in ChatGPT, generative AI? And where am I now? So to know where you are now, you have to measure the skills. So you will know the size of the gap. Let's say the average situation we saw is that 60% of people are already literate. And if you want to reach 80%, your delta is the improvement of 20 percentage points in your program to reach let's say the goal. So at the company level, sometimes this is not objective too. Very frequently, companies, they just write, I want every decision to be made using data. This is not measurable. But then you should take this concept and make it measurable. So I will measure this by considering as a goal to have 80% of my people literate in generative AI, ChatGPT, prompt engineering, and so on. So these are usually good starting points you will see in any framework, is setting up goals, making it measurable, and establish what metrics you are going to use in the next cycle to make the program accountable and demonstrate success.
All right. I saw a nod from Hannah. Cool.
Good. yeah, guys, so I have just to thank Ana Maria for the invitation. It was a challenge to go through the 4 topics, but I try to link, you know, the use case of the user of Workera, how the skills metrics are built, and then put this into perspective into the skills transformation canvas and the management use cases that it unlocks when people and companies use skills data. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I for sure have learned a lot and would appreciate a deep dive into the canvas with a concrete example if you ever want to do that. So I'm putting that out there. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we have 2 more sessions when it comes to AI in learning. This is it coming over in the chat. Enjoy the rest of your day and see you around. Goodbye.